Ich darf jetzt vorstellen, David
I have the pleasure of introducing David Brown. A very warm welcome, David. Great to have you and that you're giving this presentation. And I will be announcing it in ASL.
6 things that most people don't know about Charge Syndrome. Viel Spaß beim Zuschauen, es wird bestimmt spannend.
Enjoy, it'll certainly be interesting.
Thank you, Yanis. Can you hear me at the back? Yes? Good. Good afternoon. This is, in English, we call this the graveyard slot. It's when your brains are almost completely shut down and your stomach is not doing too well, and the last thing your body wants to do is listen for almost 2 hours to a lot of talking, especially when it comes through these, makes it more difficult. I'm very happy to be here. This is always my favorite Charge conference, every 2 years. And I'm always pleased and surprised that you keep asking me to come back, because I feel I say the same kinds of things every time I come, because I talk about basic things. I talk about the foundation of Charge and what it means, and sometimes I get carried away I get too excited or too passionate, so I have to hold the podium so I stay very calm. And I always think about the interpreters who I have to make sure I don't leave them behind when I get going. This topic came to me last year. I'm on 6 Facebook pages about Charge syndrome. And many years ago, parents would put questions. They would have questions about their child. And I used to jump right in and I would type an answer. I would be a typical teacher and a typical man, and I would explain things all the time. But over the years, I've been very happy because more and more parents jump in and type the answer, and I don't have to do that anymore because parents are better educated, they know more about the syndrome, they read, they use resources, and they share with each other. So I don't have to work very much on Facebook. But there is a pattern to the questions which parents put on Facebook. Certain things come up again and again. So last year I thought a good presentation would be to take those things and put them together in a presentation. And first I had 10 things, and I realized that was too much. I would need 5 hours maybe for 10 things. So I cut it to 8 things, and it was still too long, so I cut it to 6 things, and it's still too long, but I didn't want to keep cutting because I had ideas. So it's a strange presentation because it's different things. There will be 6 different topics. The good thing is they all actually come together because they all relate to your children or to you if you have Charge syndrome. And they are things which, if they're explained properly, should be quite simple. But if they're not explained, or if they're not explained properly, they can be very confusing. The biggest question that comes up on Facebook is about behavior. And the trouble with behavior is it's a huge topic. It covers everything, and it's very specific to each individual child. So I'm not talking about behavior in terms of difficult behavior. I am talking about behavior in the sense of what the children do. And in my career, my obsession has always been observing children to see what they do. I don't worry too much about what I should do with the children, because first I have to notice what the children are doing all by themselves, because that gives me a lot of information about who they are, what they like, what they don't like, what they need. And I'm always sad when professionals and professional agencies like schools don't look at children in that way. They're very inclined to have a child and they immediately know what they're going to do with the child without spending any time learning who that child is and what they actually need. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And I did this 2 days ago and it just fit in the time. Today we're a bit late, so I might cut some things, we'll see. And when I'm trying to cut things, I go faster and faster, so somebody might need to let me know to slow down. Several people already at this conference have asked me why I'm interested in charge syndrome. And I don't know the answer. Why is Kim Blake interested in charge syndrome? Why is Tim Hartshorn? Why is Julie Meyer interested? I think Kim Blake summed it up a couple of years ago when she made a little video. She was being interviewed and she said, talking about charge, there are so many bits, this is why I love charge. I mean, so many challenges to me as a practitioner that you don't know where to start. I've been so fascinated with charge syndrome because it's a conundrum. You've got to really work the puzzle, work the system, and be forever thinking outside the box. And I think that sums it up for all of us, really. The children with charge are the most complicated, the most weird, sometimes the most strange, and the most difficult to understand. And for many professionals, that would tell them not to be involved with children with charge syndrome. But there are professionals like us who are drawn to that. And I still want to know more about charge syndrome. I'm not prepared to retire and stop this because there are still things I don't understand, many, many things that I don't understand. I've got 2 slides with a lot of writing on, and I'm always told that's very bad when you're giving a presentation. So forgive me. I will read them in English, but you will see them in German. So I say, as our understanding of charge syndrome has developed over time, the great complexity of the condition has become more apparent with the identification of an ever-growing number of anomalies that need to be taken into consideration. Parents often report describing the child's issues to various professionals, and watching the professionals' faces gradually register disbelief that so many things could be affected in one individual child. And parents often say to me, I don't think the doctor believed me because I had such a list of the problems that my child has. It didn't seem possible in one child. Because of this large number of possible anomalies, parenting a child with charge syndrome invariably requires never-ending priority making. Deciding priorities, evaluating priorities, revisiting priorities, adjusting priorities, and worrying all the time once the life-threatening aspects of the condition have been addressed that the current priorities might not be the most beneficial. And I'm sure there's not a parent in this room tonight who hasn't at some point wondered if they're doing the right things with their child or if they should be doing something different. If they've missed important things and they should change what they're doing for something that's more appropriate. I talk about the problems in charge because I think you and I need to know those problems. But I just want to remind you that a long time ago, 27 years ago, I wrote this about children with Charge syndrome. So I do have a positive view of your children. I know of no identified subgroup within the population of people with multisensory impairment who have so many medical problems of such complexity and severity, and with so many hidden or delayed difficulties. And yet, no subgroup has shown such a consistent ability to rise triumphantly above these problems. That's the important part. No subgroup has shown such a consistent ability to rise triumphantly above these problems. People familiar with Charge association often speak about iron willpower, great spirit, and a marked sense of humor being distinctive features of most people with Charge association. And I think I've seen at this conference again and again many, many examples of people with Charge showing iron willpower. I've seen that today in the consultations very, very noticeably, but also fantastic spirit and a marked sense of humor. And I think another reason why I'm interested in Charge, people with Charge are great experimenters. They're like scientists or explorers. They want something or they want to do something and they find a way to do it. And it might be impossible according to the medical report. It might be impossible according to the psychology report, but the children persist and find a way to do things. And you see this again and again. And you see it when children are 3 months old, and you see it when the children are adults and they're 30 years old. This ability to explore and experiment and persist is a very marked feature of the syndrome. So I'm going to go through my 6 things, and I'm aware that I'm speaking to a very informed, educated audience. So some of these things you will know about, some of them you will know very well, but I'm sure there will be other things which perhaps you've forgotten or you've never really understood. And I hope by 5:45 this evening, I think, yes, 5:45. It seems a long way off, but you are free to leave the room anytime you want to. I have to stay here because Claudia is sitting right there. The first thing I want to talk about is deafblindness. I was very lucky because I began my job in the field of deafblindness in 1983 in London. And the very first child I met was a boy, 10 months old, diagnosed with Charge. Nobody knew what Charge was. We'd never heard of it. He could have been the first child ever diagnosed in England with the condition because it was very new condition. So for me, deafblindness and Charge syndrome have always been the same thing. They've always been together. And for many years, I worked hard to get those two worlds together, to try and get people involved with Charge syndrome to think about deafblindness, and to try and get my colleagues in deafblindness to think about Charge syndrome. And I'm pleased to say 40 years later, the connection is there in most people's minds. Deafblindness is a confusing name. People often think it means completely blind and completely deaf. But actually, it covers a whole range of vision problems and hearing problems. All you need is for one person to have some vision problems and some hearing problems, and you can say they have deaf blindness. And I think anybody born with charge should be considered as having deaf blindness until they prove that they don't have deaf blindness. The idea that you can be born with charge with many, many problems, but your vision and your hearing is normal, is probably a mistake to think that. And I will talk about that as I go. So I wrote this in an article. Most people with charge that I've met satisfy the criteria for being considered as having deaf blindness, even if they have some useful vision and hearing. Deaf blindness is a disability that is defined in functional, not clinical terms, and that's important. We're talking about function, how your child functions, how they are able to relate to the world or unable to relate to the world. For each individual with charge, it's mostly about difficulties in accessing information, not just from the world around them, but even from their own bodies. And then I say, children with charge syndrome are truly multi-sensory impaired, having difficulties not only with vision and hearing, but also with the senses that perceive balance, touch, temperature, pain, pressure, and smell, as well as problems with breathing and swallowing, eating and drinking, digestion and temperature control. I stopped there because the slide was full, but I could, as you know, I could go on and add another half a dozen, 10 more areas of difficulty. And I'm going to skip a slide to save time and remind you of our senses. Oops. And I give you this list of senses just to remind you that we have more than 5 senses. If you were like me, when you were in school, you learned that we have 5 senses, and we all learned what those senses are. There are other senses which are very important, and I didn't know about those until I was 38, I think. I was in middle age before I learned about these other senses, and I wish somebody told me when I started teaching, because it really helps to know. So you are familiar with vision, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. But I've included here some other senses. You will see proprioception, which is the sense, the receptors are in the joints and the muscles all through the body, and that's the sense that tells our brain where our body is and what it's doing. So as I'm talking to you, I can feel my legs. And I don't have, my hands are here. I'm not feeling my legs with my hands, but I can feel them perfectly. And if I move them, if I go from foot to foot, I feel them even better because my proprioceptive sense is keeping my brain informed. I don't have to think about it. But if that sense wasn't working, I would probably fall down because I need to be able to feel where my feet are. And then you will see pain, Schmerzen. People don't think of pain as a sensory system, but it is just like the others. And of course, pain, if you experience pain, it's very bad, but it's a very important sense because it's a safety sense. It tells us something is wrong and we need to be aware of it and pay attention to it. And we know in charge syndrome, children have big difficulties with perceiving pain. They can often hurt themselves and not realize they've done that for some time. So we need to be aware of that. And then you will see next to pain, Gleichgewicht, or the vestibular sense. I'll talk about this a lot now, but this sense is located in the inner ear on both sides of the body, and I will go into it in more detail. It's one of my 6 numbers. But I do think it's good to remember these sensory systems because I have a theory, because the senses connect our brain to our body. The only way our brain knows where our body is and what our body is doing and where our body is in space, that keeps the brain informed of all those things. If the senses are missing or not working properly, your brain doesn't get the information it needs. And because with charge syndrome, people tend to have most of those senses not working properly, their brain is not feeling their body effectively. And if the brain doesn't feel the body properly, the brain wants to do things to improve the information coming from the body. And when we look at children with charge, especially babies and toddlers with charge, many of the things they do are attempts to get better sensory stimulation coming through the body to give their brain a better idea where their body is and what their body's doing. It's a very powerful need that the human brain needs. And some of the things, somebody said to me a few hours ago, 2 years ago, you showed us wonderful pictures of hands and fingers, and I thought, oh no, I'm doing it again today. But as I said at the beginning, this is very important, but it doesn't look important. You know, if you're dealing with feeding issues and not sleeping and reflux and epilepsy and all those things, this doesn't look important, but it really is important. So here's a teenager with charge doing something which I can't do. I mean, I'm a smart man, I'm intelligent, I'm experienced, I'm highly educated. I couldn't do this at all. The person doing this is doing it, I believe, in order to give their brain a better idea where their hands are, because the brain otherwise doesn't feel the hands very effectively, because their muscle tone is probably low, the muscles are probably a bit weak, and we say floppy, and they've discovered this is a really good way to feel where your hands and your arms are, because they can then relax more, because the brain is not saying, where are my hands? What are my arms doing? I need to know where they are. I need to know everything's okay. So they do this. Now, this is a teenager. This is a baby. The baby doesn't have cerebral palsy. The baby isn't doing this because he can't help it. The baby is doing this because he explored and experimented, and he found a really good way to feel his hands more effectively. Now, other babies feel their hands anyway. They don't need to worry. But this baby, his brain was probably worrying because it didn't know quite where his hands were. And the baby has discovered this way of giving him the information. And I'm a technophobe, and over coronavirus, I fell in love with my computer, and all the time I'm on YouTube and Facebook and things. And I was preparing this talk, and I found this. I loved it. Keep calm and fingers crossed. And that's exactly what that baby is doing. By crossing his fingers, it helps him to keep calm. It helps his brain to know, oh, there's my hands, everything's fine, there's nothing to worry about. This is an older child having a medical appointment. You see, he likes to be barefoot for better contact with the floor and the world. He's in the wrong kind of chair because really his feet should be resting on something solid, but the doctor doesn't know that, I guess. And you can see it's just the same. Keep calm and toes crossed. Clench your toes in order to help you relax and wait for the doctor. And I'm guessing this child knows what doctors do and what doctors are about. And it's not usually nice. Here's another child waiting to see the doctor. We call this planking. I'm told you do it in yoga. I'm allergic to yoga, so I wouldn't know. And when you look at these things, I always look at these things and think, I wouldn't do that. I would never do that. It would hurt me. I would fall. I would damage my back. But of course, I don't have charge syndrome. My sensory systems used to be really good. Now they're not so good, but that's because I'm getting old. It's nothing to do with me developing charge syndrome, though sometimes I do think, did I catch charge syndrome somewhere? But you notice he's planking. Again, he's getting a lot of extra sensory information from the way he's lying on the arms of the chair. Here's a boy going to sleep. I'm sure most of your children do this or have done it. Bringing one ankle up on the other knee is one of the most typical charge postural behaviors. You get an awful lot of strong sensory information from your legs if you do this position. On me, it actually hurts because I'm very stiff and old. If I bring one knee up and then I bring the other leg on the top, it hurts all through my leg and in my butt as well. Not only has he got his legs in this position to sleep, but he's covered his face to shut out the light, and then he's put his hands under his body, so his hands are being pushed into the floor. So there's a lot of compression and stretching and twisting going on, all proprioceptive stimulation to let his brain know exactly where his body is. It's safe, he's not going to fall, he won't hurt himself, he can just switch off and go off to sleep. And I show this picture, and many parents say their child always goes to sleep with their legs in this position. Again, I couldn't go to sleep if I did this. It would be so uncomfortable for me. I'm actually talking at the moment about deafblindness. I'll come back to posture. But in the United States, we have a deafblind census, which we must complete. One of my biggest problems as a presenter is when little children come out, and I think, why am I presenting? It would be so much better if I just played with the children. But I know I can't do that because Claudia is sitting right in front of me. So we have a deafblind census every year, and this is an old census. This is from 7 years ago, but they talk about the population, and this particular year there were just over 10,000 children in the United States from birth to leaving school. And they look at the information about the children, and when they talk about syndromes and disorders, if you look at the numbers, you can see charge is huge compared to the other. 10,000 children nationally, and almost 1,000 have charge syndrome. if you looked at the census 25 years ago, there would have been very few children with charge in the census. The population has grown because the children are surviving. Many children who 40 years ago died almost when they were born, they are now surviving because the medical profession has become more and more skilled. We know more about charge babies to keep them alive. And also, people are more familiar with charge. So there's still a problem with misdiagnosis, but more and more children are being diagnosed, mostly thanks to the internet and thanks to websites like your German website and the Charge Syndrome Foundation and so on. So it's become a very, very large part of the deafblind world in the United States and also in other countries. And that's why at the professional day here, which was yesterday and the day before, we had people came from Hanover. And in the past, we've had people from Heiligenbronn and Würzburg. The deafblind centers in Germany are sending teachers to this conference because they have children with charge, and they're finding those children a puzzle, and they're trying to work out what's going on. So don't worry if your child can see and can hear things, especially with glasses or a cochlear implant or hearing aids. Think about them as deafblind and needing good deafblind education and supports. So that's number one. Number two is vestibular dysfunction. And this, if you know me, you know this is my obsession. There was a book, there are two books about charge produced in America, and Tim Hartshorn and Meg Hefner, who are here, produced both books. They were editors. And I wrote a chapter in both books about vestibular dysfunction. What's interesting to me, in the first book, I only wrote 2 pages. In the second book, I wrote about 10 pages because over those years, I'd learned so much more. And in the first book, I said, of all the many sensory impairments associated with charge syndrome, absence of or significant damage to the vestibular sense is perhaps the most far-reaching in its implications, the least understood, and the most overlooked. This has been ignored so much by the professions, including the medical profession. I got to know one of the top ear, nose, and throat specialists, audiology people in the United States, a specialist in charge syndrome. And I talked to him about the vestibular sense, and he was very surprised and very interested. And the next time I saw him, he said, I have several hundred scans, MRI scans, and CT scans of the ears of children with charge syndrome. I always look at the cochlea, and I never look at the vestibular apparatus because I prescribe hearing aids and cochlear implants, and I'm an audiologist, so the vestibular system isn't my thing, my professional thing. And he wrote to me about a year later, and he said, we're finding, going back through the scans, we're finding that the vestibular apparatus was damaged or missing in about 95% of those children. And we never looked at it, we were never interested in it. And now they have 2 physical therapists who are developing vestibular therapy in their hospital for the patients with charge syndrome. So I need to keep talking about this, and I should talk about it to doctors, but you know, where do you see doctors who want to listen? I mean, Kim Blake, but she knows all this anyway. And then in the same article, I said, in the future, if we investigate the vestibular sense, In the future, it's likely that we will discover close links between significant vestibular impairment and many of the currently unexplained charge behavioral features, such as difficulty with self-regulation of arousal levels, sudden and apparently unpredictable mood changes, poor memory, and executive dysfunction. So what I'm saying is this is a really, really important sense, and we shouldn't get too obsessed with vision and hearing, because there's also the vestibular sense we should be getting obsessed with. If you're not familiar with this sense, this is a diagram showing what you should have on both sides of your head in the inner ear. You have the external ear, the middle ear, and then the inner ear. And in the inner ear, you have the cochlea, which is the thing at the bottom, which looks like a snail shell. And that, as you know, is the organ of hearing. It's hollow tube, and inside it's lined with nerve hairs, and sound comes in through the ear, creates vibration, and when that vibration touches those nerve hairs, it's converted to electrical energy, which goes to the brain and is converted to sound again, and we hear. Everything else in this diagram is the vestibular apparatus. There are two bulbs which are in blue, the utricle and the saccule. One of those is stimulated by movement vertically. So when you go in a lift or an elevator, that part of the vestibular apparatus feels that you're going up or coming down. The other bulb relates to horizontal movement, like sitting in a car or sitting on a train. And it tells you you're going forwards or sideways or backwards, depending where you sit on the train. And I've known Julie Meyer a long time, but only on this trip I discovered she can't go backwards on the train or she throws up. So we had to run along the trains looking for a seat going forwards. I don't have a problem with it, which is nice. And then the important part of the diagram for us is these brown things. There are 3 semicircular canals. And the vestibular apparatus, again, it's very small, it's very fragile, it's hollow. Everything there is hollow, but it's filled with fluid. Where the cochlea only has nerve hairs, the vestibular apparatus has nerve hairs, but it's filled with fluid. And they also have little crystals, tiny little rocks. And as the head moves, the fluid moves, and those rocks roll one way and then the other way. They bump into the nerve hairs, and that converts to electrical energy, goes to the brain, and it tells us where our head is and what our head is doing. So even with my eyes closed, I know my head's going forward, I know it's going back, I know it's going left and right and left and right. I can feel all that because my vestibular system is telling me very, very quickly. If you look in the top left-hand corner, you will see the nerve that joins all this apparatus to the brain. That is the 8th cranial nerve number 8. And Kim Blake talked about this a lot yesterday. So hearing and vestibular sense share the same cranial nerve. So if that cranial nerve is damaged, it's quite likely that somebody with deafness will also have vestibular problems. And anyone with vestibular problems will probably have hearing problems. It's very, very likely. I hope I explained that effect. Oh, and I should say, when you look at a scan of a child's inner ear with charge syndrome, very often those semicircular canals are not there. Or there might be a little piece of them, but only a small piece. But sometimes the scan shows they are there perfectly. The scan doesn't show if they're working or not. And another problem with doctors, they do the scan and they say, everything's fine with the vestibular system. And you see the child and it's obvious they have big, big vestibular problems. They lie on the floor, they can't stand up, they can't walk, they're 5 years old. You know they have major vestibular problems, but it looks as if the anatomy is there. What's missing is the neurology. The apparatus, it's like, you know, the computer is there and it's expensive and it's beautiful, but there's no electricity coming because the wire is broken. So to say everything's fine is not totally correct. And we always have to think about function rather than structure. Structure is important, but function is the one thing, it's the reality of what we're doing.
David?
Yes?
Moritz has a question.
Oh. Great. Okay.
Ich habe eine Frage.
I have a question.
Wenn man jetzt, wenn das im Ohr kaputt ist,
If it's broken in the ear, then you're automatically also deaf, correct? If that's what the ENT finds?
Not automatically. Oh, sorry. Not automatically. But very often.
Also zum Beispiel,
So let's give you an example. If it's very loud,
und dann kann man ja auch gehörlos werden.
you can also go deaf if you're exposed to very sudden loud noises, and then it breaks.
Yes. Yes. But the vestibular sense will not be damaged by loud noises.
Ich habe auch noch eine
I
Frage.
also have a question.
Ich stehe mal auf.
I'll get up.
Und zwar,
So,
also ich wollte auch noch mal dazu was sagen.
I also wanted to say something on that. Let's say
Vor ganz langer Zeit,
a long time ago,
Mama mich geboren hat,
when I was born,
da war es halt auch so, dass ich ein Herz
it was also the case that I had a heart defect and I was deaf.
und ich bin halt 100%
And
taub,
I'm
weil es halt so
deaf
ist,
100% because
dass wenn man halt komplett taub ist,
when
dann
you're
kann man ja nicht
totally
hören,
deaf,
aber ich
it
habe
means you
trotzdem
can't
Hörhilfen
hear,
bekommen
but I
und
still got hearing aids and I could hear a little
zum Beispiel
bit.
ein Auto laut
And
hupt,
now if I can hear a car honking, for example, then I can hear that. Or on the train, for example, if there's a loud noise, I can also hear that. Or a bicycle bell, for example, I can also hear that with my hearing aids. Moritz, when we are walking somewhere together, Moritz and I, Moritz is completely deaf. He doesn't hear those things. But for example, there's a car honking. I can hear it and I can protect Moritz from the car and the car can pass. When I take off my hearing aid in the evening,
dann könnte ich zum Beispiel, wenn jetzt
I
jemand mich rufen
could not hear it if somebody called my name, for example.
And you make a good point about function, not structure. Oh, wearing the headphones. I wondered why everything got so loud. I'm a technophobe. I said, Julie did that yesterday. Yes. How many of you were told about your child's hearing that there was no hearing and hearing aids or a cochlear implant wouldn't help, wouldn't work? Probably some of you. And then they got hearing aids or a cochlear implant, and it did help. Maybe it didn't help a lot, but it did make a difference.
Ja, bei mir ist es ja auch schwer mit dem CI.
It's also difficult for me with the CI. For example, when a car is approaching fast and I can't hear it and I can't see it, then I would be surprised by it. So it is a bit difficult. If somebody was completely deafblind, they wouldn't see or hear that.
Yes, and I'll say again, the point I made is that if the cochlea, someone is born with a cochlea which is not working properly, it's quite likely that their vestibular system will also not be working properly. It's possible that the vestibular sense could be fine, but the cochlea not. But usually we would expect both to be affected. And loud noise, very loud noise, can damage the cochlea and can make a person permanently deaf. But very loud noise does not affect the vestibular system because it doesn't receive noise. It relates to movement of the head. Okay? Good. I really like talking about people with charge syndrome when they're in the room and they're looking at me and listening to me. It's very healthy for a professional. So I'm being very careful about what I say. I won't go through this list now. I've put it up for you. But I do think this list is there to show you the huge range of things which will be impacted if the vestibular sense is not working properly. It isn't just about having problems with balance. It affects functional vision, functional hearing, self-regulation, memory development, development of speech, development of sign language. All those things will be problems if the vestibular sense is missing or damaged. And I will talk a little bit about why it happens. Oh no, I don't do that in this session. So I'll say it now. There are many reasons why people are born with vestibular problems. Charge is just one of those reasons. If the mother during pregnancy has an infection, like rubella syndrome or cytomegalovirus, the mother may have a very mild illness, but the virus can damage the baby in her womb. And the damage can include damage to the eyes and the heart and the inner ear, both hearing and the vestibular system. If a mother during pregnancy uses alcohol and abuses alcohol, the alcohol can damage the hearing and the vision and the vestibular system of the fetus. And then there are some other syndromes which include vestibular damage, but charge is the most common syndrome with the highest incidence of congenital vestibular dysfunction. As I said, about 95%, maybe higher. So it's really important. That was number 2. I hope you remember I'm talking about 6 things. I forgot, but I just saw a big number 3 and I thought, oh, the 3rd thing. Oh.
Ja, zum Beispiel, es gibt ja ganz
So,
verschiedene
for
Gründe.
example, there are many reasons. For example, a woman is pregnant,
Ist es ja auch so,
then
dass, also, dass sie halt, wenn sie jetzt
for example, she drinks a lot of alcohol, she's constantly drunk, and then the baby is born. The baby can also die because it has too many conditions.
wenn man schwanger ist,
Or when you're pregnant
Frau halt heimlich
and the woman smokes secretly, for example, then it can also happen that the baby could die or that it has a disorder. So that's not good.
Ja, genau, das stimmt. Ja, das stimmt.
Yes, that's right.
Weil das ist ja auch so, wenn man, also Charge zum Beispiel.
So charge didn't really exist that much in the past, and if a woman is pregnant and has a baby with child, there's a variety of issues. There can be heart issues, because in the past, all the issues already existed, but then the babies died because there wasn't any surgery for them. And now there are surgeries for them, and that's why people with charge can survive longer.
Okay. That's a good point about survival. I met the first child with charge 41 years ago. That's my one claim to fame. I got in remarkably early. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was there. And I can remember when hospitals in London began to know me as somebody who could work with babies with charge. If they had a baby with charge, sometimes they would contact me. The baby would be in the NICU, in the hospital, and the youngest baby I ever worked with was 6 days old, and he's still alive. He now works in a nursery growing plants, for garden plants and things in London. I would speak to the hospital, speak to the parents, and make an appointment to come to the hospital and meet the baby, maybe next week or the following week when I had time. And sometimes I would get a phone call to say the baby has died. This happened to me sometimes, and it wasn't uncommon, because then we didn't understand. We didn't have gastrostomy tubes. We didn't have trachs. We just didn't know what these babies needed to survive. And I think, although it looks as if there's more and more charge now, I think it's really more and more children surviving. I don't think charge has spread like coronavirus. I think it's just that more and more children survive. We're better at saving them. And I should say, the first children I ever worked with, to me, seemed very complicated, really hard to understand. Now, when I look back, they were very simple. You know, well, they just seem so straightforward compared to the children we're working with now, who have a much higher incidence of significant medical problems. The population has changed dramatically, but I'm talking about 40 years, so it's a long time. I'm going to talk about some vision issues, and two things in particular. First of all, visual field loss, and then I'll talk about visual fixation. So I'm going to show you two diagrams, and I hope I explain properly. Here you see an eyeball, which is in cross-section. The eye is looking left to the window. The back of the eye is on the right, and you see the optic nerve going to the brain. And the side of the eye is removed so we can see inside the eyeball. And you will see that red area is the retina. The retina is that layer, thin layer of skin, which goes all around the eyeball, on the inside of the eyeball. And that skin is very sensitive to light. And we see, because light comes in through the front of the eye, the image goes onto the retina, And the retina turns it into electrical energy, sends it down through the optic nerve to the visual cortex, which turns it back into images. And that's how we see. You will see a yellow area called the macula in the retina. That is the area of fine vision. That's the part of the retina we use when we're reading a book or reading a text on our phone. It gives you fine vision. But all the rest of the retina is there, so that if I look at Heiko, I use my macula so I can see you, but I can also see all of you. I don't see the fine detail of you, but my retina tells me you're all there. If you look at the retina, the red area, you will see at the bottom, it's white. That is a representation of a coloboma. That's an area where there is no retina. It didn't develop. And in a fetus, when the eyes begin to develop, as I think Meg Hefner said yesterday, the eye starts to grow from the top and it grows down, and when it gets to the bottom, it all joins up and you have a nice eyeball. And so many of the problems in charge are caused by things which don't develop in the fetus, or part develops and then it stops, but it stops too soon. So you have these multiple problems. If the eye is going to form, probably the top of the eye will be okay. If there's going to be a coloboma, it's more likely to happen towards the bottom of the retina. If it happens at the top, the eye won't form. So there are children with charge who don't have eyes, or who only have one eye. Fortunately, that's very unusual, but it is possible. I've only met one child who had no eyes. But if there is going to be a coloboma, it will probably be towards the bottom of the eye. There might be one big coloboma, it might be small, there might be two colobomas or three or four, and one eye might be okay, and the other eye might have a coloboma. It varies enormously. And when you see the eye doctor, it's very easy for them to draw a picture of your child's retina or to take a photograph of it, so you can see where is the coloboma, how big is it, and that then will give you an idea what the retina can see and what the retina can't see, the blind spots where your visual field is missing. If I show you another eye, this is a different eye, but it could be in the same person. Again, the eye is looking to the window. You will notice in this eye, there's less retina. And the coloboma at the bottom is much bigger. And in fact, the macula never developed. So this eye will never be able to read a book, will never be able to look at fine print in a book. There will be peripheral vision because there's a lot of retina still there, but that crucial area near the optic disc is missing. And it's a much, much bigger coloboma. So this eye will have more significant vision problems than the first eye. And there's a question, but you need a microphone.
Unser Sohn soll das so haben.
So we're told that's what our son has, but he can pick up lint off the floor, he can use the iPad, but they say he doesn't have a macula or a coloboma on the macula. But if I understood this correctly, that doesn't make sense then, does it? So what the doctors are saying and contrasting that with what he's doing and where it's supposed to be. Now, I don't know about reading. He's 5.5 years old. But
But if he can use the iPad, that doesn't make sense to me, does it? Did I misunderstand?
No, no, you understood perfectly. Because function matters more than structure. Just as doctors, the audiologist will say, your child has no hearing nerve, so hearing aids would be a waste of time.
Da auch nicht.
And you insist they have hearing aids, and suddenly they can hear. Maybe they can only hear a bomb going off, but they can hear. Who do you believe, the audiologist or the child? Obviously, you have to believe the child. And it's just the same with the eyes. Again and again, they will say, this child will be very severely blind. It's big coloboma, the macula is missing. And then one day you'll see the child go and pick up something really small. We don't know how they do it, but somehow, what did I say at the beginning? They experiment, they explore, and if it's something they want, something they like, if it works to their advantage, they keep experimenting and find a way. And they can sometimes develop an awareness of space just through their peripheral vision. But you're right, in clinical terms, it doesn't make sense. And that's why I'm going to say something. Nobody will sue me because I'm not mentioning any doctors' names. But I think you have to be careful with what the doctors tell you about your child's potential functioning. Sometimes they're right, but sometimes they're wrong. First, because they don't know charge syndrome. Secondly, they don't understand the intervention we have now from families and professionals like us, teachers and blind teachers and deaf teachers and physical therapists. And thirdly, they don't understand the power of motivation. You know, if your children want to do things, so often they do it. And as I said, we know it's impossible, but you see them do it. So you can either say, I'm imagining this, I didn't see it because it's too stupid, or you can say, he just picked up that lint. And you know he did. So you're always going to get those conflicts of, you know, what the clinical view says and what real life tells you. And you always go with your child, obviously. But that's a really good question. And it's made me criticize doctors again, which I shouldn't do because I'm scared of them. So let's go back to these two pictures. You will see, if you think of your visual field, open your eyes, you have a huge area of things you can see. I'm blind in my left eye, so I can see from the sign language interpreter to my colleague Julie. I can't see anything beyond Julie because this eye is blind, but I can still see a lot. If you have two eyes working, you put them together and you can see a huge field of vision. If the colobomas are at the bottom of the retina, it's easy to think that you can't see down here because the bottom of the retina is missing. But actually the opposite is the case, and I'll explain why. Because when we look with our eyes, the image comes in to the eye, but as the image comes through the lens turns it upside down. So again, if I look at Heiko, the image of Heiko comes onto my retina, but upside down. The information then converts to electricity, goes to my brain, and my brain turns Heiko the right way up. I don't know how that happens, but so many doctors have told me that's what happens. So think about it. Imagine that's Heiko on the left. It doesn't look like him. I should draw a little beard on that for next time. You see the image of Heiko. This eye can see Heiko, but on the retina, he comes in upside down. So his head is at the bottom of the retina, and his feet are at the top. So if the bottom of the retina is missing, it's going to be Heiko's head that you don't see. So although the collobomas tend to be in the bottom of the retina, it's the top of the visual field that's missing. And parents always get that wrong. They always misunderstand. But if you look at the children's behavior, you will see how often, in terms of vision, how often children with charge do this. They extend the head back because it's like they're wearing a hat which is pulled too low. I can't see Heiko, so I have to do this. Now I can see him perfectly. And you see this head position again and again. And I explain this sometimes to a parent, and I explain it beautifully and very clearly. And then they say, no, she can't see down the bottom. And I say, well, let's talk about it. And they say, well, if she's crossing the room, she does this with her head, but then she falls over the coffee table. Oh, then she falls over the coffee table because she can't see it. Well, you have to think about this. If you are lifting your visual field up, you won't see the coffee table. You don't have full visual field, so what you have got, you're using to move forwards. You're not looking down at your feet. You've taken that peripheral vision away from the floor, so it looks as if you're blind down there, but actually you're not looking down there. It's very different. And I hope I explained that. That was visual field. Now I'm going to talk about the connection between the vestibular sense and vision. And it's a reflex. And this is a clinical definition. In normal head movement, the eyes move in the opposite direction to the head and at the same speed to stabilize the retinal image for visual fixation. All this, I'll explain what this means. And I just want to go fast forward here, if you'll bear with me. What this means is, again, I keep picking on Heiko because he's right in front of me. If I look at Heiko, my macula finds him, and we make eye contact. I only have one eye, but this is a good one, and I see you. Now I can do this, and this. I can go down, I can come up, and all the time I'm looking at Heiko's eyes. No problem. But my eye is going there, and here, and there. My eye is going all over, but it keeps looking at Heiko because my vestibular system is controlling my eye movements. It's hard for us to understand because we don't use this reflex consciously because it's a reflex. You know, a reflex is something that happens without our control. And when I go over to my left, I want to stay looking at Heiko. So my vestibular sense sends a message to my brain very quickly saying, oh, the eye is moving over to the left, so it needs to move to the right. Your head's going to the left, so your eye needs to move to the right. But if your head's going very slow to the left, your eye needs to move to the right very slow at the same speed. And if I go down, my vestibular system sends a message saying, oh, the eye is going down, so it needs to move up. The head goes down and the eye moves up so that you can stay looking. If my vestibular sense isn't working properly, when I go to the left, my eye goes to the left as well. and then I have to look for Heiko again. When I go down, my eye goes down. Now I'm looking at the computer, and I have to look for Heiko. Then when I come up, I'm now looking at the back of the room. Can you see how my eye is not being controlled effectively? I mean, it is, but I'm ignoring the message from my vestibular system. If my vestibular system is not working properly, that's what's going to happen. If my head moves, my eye goes with it, and I have to find it again. And what do we see in children with charge? This was at one of the American charge conferences. There's a big party on Saturday night and a disco and all sorts of crazy things. And one of the parents took this picture and sent it to me. These are 3 young children. They're not related. They're not copying each other, but they all want to look at a telephone or a tablet. And the first thing they do is lie on the floor, get on their side. They need their head and their body completely stable, because if they do it sitting up, they're going to wobble, and every time their head wobbles, their eyes move away from the tablet. They can't stay looking. And they're explorers and inventors, and they find a way of doing it. And this mother said there were 2 other kids just out. She wished she'd gone back a bit, because there were 5 of them all doing exactly the same thing. Here's an older child on the couch. He's sideways on the couch. He's resting his forehead on the arm of the couch. It's fully supported. He's on his hands and knees, and the tablet is underneath, and he's watching a cartoon. He doesn't have to keep his head steady because it's fixed. It's completely supported. It's never going to pull away and spoil watching the cartoon. Who taught the boy to do this? He taught himself. This is the whole point of what I'm saying. The children explore, and they think about function, and they go for the best functional thing they can manage. And they keep exploring and inventing until they get it right. And the worst thing you can say to this boy is, sit up properly. Put your bottom on the couch, sit back, and hold the tablet so you can see it properly, like a big boy. Don't we do that? Sit up straight, take your arms off the table, stop swinging your feet. We love saying these things to children. Maybe we're stopping them looking. Maybe we're making them go more blind because we're stopping their functional adaptive behaviors. I have so many of these pictures. This is a 14-year-old girl I worked with in California. She's looking at pictures, actually, picture books. She's on her back. Her head is fully supported. She brings one ankle up on the other knee, and then she pushes 2 fingers on her right hand against her lower lip, against the teeth. She pushes hard. And once she does that, she can control, she only has one eye, she can control that eye movement very nicely to scan the picture and look for details. If you ask her to take those fingers away, she can't do it anymore. Her eye starts to roll around out of her control. She knows what works for her. Now, we don't want these children to always be on their back with their legs up, pushing their mouth. But at this point in her life, this was her best way to use that little bit of vision in one eye for getting fine detail and information. Oops. Here's a girl on a couch. She's facing down to the floor. Her knees are on the couch, but she's resting on her head on the floor. The tablet is underneath her, and she's able to use one hand to operate the tablet when the when the video finishes. The children like secure positions. They like to feel safe. And again, back to your question about the macula and picking up lint. If she likes a safe position, why is she doing this? Because to me, this would be a disaster. You know, I would fall over. I would be so ill if I tried to do this. But it works for her. I'll come back to that. Here's another child who likes a nice, secure, stable position to use his vision. He's on the arm of the chair. His feet are on the back of the chair. And you see he's resting on his side, and the tablet is up at an angle down on the chair. Again, this looks like a very unstable, dangerous position. And I've always had some ideas why they do these rather dangerous positions. And a few months ago, I was with an adult with charge, and she was doing this kind of thing. And I said to her, why do you get yourself in quite a dangerous position where you could fall in order to use your vision? And she said, it helps me to stay awake. And I think the children, they get themselves to the edge of danger. They get to a point where if they're not careful, they will fall and everything will go wrong. And that keeps them alert. And it's counterintuitive, because I would rather lie on the floor, but I don't have charge syndrome. And you see these extraordinary postures. And what all these children are saying is this, that you fix your body to fix your head, to fix your eyes, so you can then use your vision in the best, most reliable, and most comfortable way possible for you. And as I say, we don't want children lying on the floor for the rest of their lives, but at the moment, developmentally, this is the best way for them to use their vision. And we have to know that, we have to respect that, and we have to say there will be times when this child needs to lie on the floor or lie on the couch in order to use their vision. And then somebody says to me, what if their vision is fine, but they just like to lie on the floor because it's better than working? And I think, well, that's a different topic. And we need to talk about that in a different place, because all of a sudden we're talking about children being bad and doing naughty things. And I'm not talking about that today. Can people with charge be lazy and naughty and dishonest? Yes, of course they can. I mean, we can all be lazy and naughty and dishonest, but we shouldn't be thinking that as the first thing we think about. And this is a message to teachers especially. We need to find the function of the behavior, and that can take a long time. But I'm giving you a quick shortcut to find these things out. So I hope I've explained that okay. You're all shrinking. You were all much bigger an hour ago. Isn't that amazing? And it's not because there's something wrong with my vision. And it's perfectly okay and human. Now everybody is sitting up. I'm not being a teacher and telling you off. I'm just commenting that I know you're tired, and I know this gets more and more difficult, but I'll keep going. But I might not finish everything, but we'll see. So now I want to talk a little bit about balance and walking, those two things. And I'm going to go fast forward. And this is one of my favorite quotes. Oh.
Ich habe eine Frage. Warum?
I have a question. Why is it that people with charge are so short often? Why don't they grow tall? Even if they're 40 years old, they're still short. So I'm 21 now, but I'm taller now than Tatjana is, who's next to me. And still, I'm shorter than other people. Now, my parents, for example, who don't have charge, are taller than I am. I've got charge, I'm short.
We know that what we would call small stature is part of the syndrome. And I can't give you the medical reason why short stature is part of the syndrome. You would need to ask Kim Blake or possibly Meg Hefner, and they could give you the medical, technical information. But it's part of the syndrome, just like collobomas and vestibular dysfunction and heart problems and all those other things. You know, charge comes with a huge list of possible problems. And I'm sorry I can't tell you anything more technical. I do know that children often need growth hormone to help them grow. I think we will have more questions in a moment. No? Yes.
Also es ist ja auch so, dass man
So,
dass Lehrer oft denken, dass Kinder
what often happens is that teachers think that children with charge are lazy because of their postures, and then they're surprised that they're so lazy, but they don't know. The teachers have no idea why these are the postures we adopt at school. And as we just saw, sometimes we sit a bit differently, and it can be tiring when the teachers don't understand that, and it makes me mad when they tell me things like that.
I'm glad it makes you mad, because it makes me mad as well. I wrote an article a few years ago, and the title is a quote from a physical therapist. Why are children with charge syndrome so lazy? Many physiotherapists have asked me that question, and I always explain that actually the opposite is true. They are among the most hard-working people you will ever meet, and you have no idea how hard they work for even the most simple thing. But you just put it perfectly. Because of the postures, because of the low muscle tone, because of the need to stabilize the vision, which means lying down or propping your head or putting your head on the table to look at something, people think you're being lazy. And we just need to keep telling people that's not the case. So this quote is there just to remind you that gravity is a big problem. And for children with charge, especially younger children, being flat on the floor is the safest, most functional position they can be in. And in my work, if I'm trying to evaluate a child and it looks to me like they have problems with posture, I like to assess their vision and hearing when they're lying on the floor or lying on a couch. They don't have to sit up. They don't have to be on a chair at a table. That's a crazy idea, that you can't assess vision and hearing unless the child is sitting on a chair. But many, many specialists believe that. All they know is you put the child on a chair and then you evaluate their vision and hearing. And it's nonsense. It doesn't make sense. You want to see the best functional vision and hearing that the child can do, so you give them the right position, the right posture, and the right physical support. I've just noticed the time. I have 15 minutes, so I won't be able to do everything. So I'm going to, I'll just show some pictures. I think pictures are much easier for you at this point on Saturday afternoon. Here is, this boy's mom is in the room, I think, unless she's gone to bed. Oh, she's right at the back. I'd met this boy, and I met his parents here in that corner 6 years ago, eight years ago maybe, a long time ago. And then I met him in school in the Netherlands, and his mum very kindly sent me a stick full of photographs of her son doing these things. And she said, you can use these if you want to. So I do, I use them a lot. This was him taking a break at school. And, you know, when I take a break, I don't stand on my head with my feet pushed against the wall, mostly because I can't do it. And haven't I said all through this talk, these children do things I can't. Even if I try, I can't do them. And what he's giving himself, I think, is very deep pressure, very powerful proprioceptive sensation, which is helping him to reorganize his body and get his brain in better contact with the body. Here's a younger child. This girl can't stand yet. Think about that. If you try to stand her up, she gets very distressed and she bends her legs and goes down on the floor. If you leave her alone, this is what she does. She goes into the bear crawl and then she rests on her head and she puts her arms back and she stretches her arms very tight. She's giving herself all the proprioceptive stimulation that other children of her age give themselves by running, walking, jumping, running, climbing on the couch and jumping off. I mean, children of this age do that all day, don't they? And you wish they'd stop. You don't understand where they're finding the energy. But their brains need a high level of vestibular and proprioceptive input in order for the brainstem to develop and grow. If you can't stand up and you can't jump and you can't climb on the couch and jump off, then you have to find another way of getting those sensations. And here's somebody doing it. It's not a very good posture. She could damage her neck and her spine. So we don't want her doing this for the next 10 years, but at the moment, it works for her. But what this girl is saying to me is, I need some more intensive physiotherapy. I need some more controlled movement. We need to do some gymnastics. We need together to do more of this standing, jumping, rolling, swinging, and all the other things which children of her age give themselves. We need to help her get those things. Here's my friend again. This is probably my favorite picture of him. And it makes a point, you know. My article could say, why are children with Charge syndrome so crazy? Because they do things that people think are nuts. And they are functional adaptive behavior. You know, this is smart behavior because he's realized something. If he wears his rucksack on his head, so it becomes a Kopfsack, I suppose, instead of a rucksack, the straps pull up under his arms, but the bag presses on his head. And suddenly, the rucksack is giving his brain a much better idea where his head is. So when he walks, his walking posture is better. It's not so, he doesn't sway so much. He doesn't have to bend his knees. His brain has a much better feeling of where his body is. Here's a boy who's going to use fine vision, as you can see, And he's collected plastic buckets in the classroom, and then he's pulled them tight on his head, and then his head, he can control his head much better with all this pressure and weight. And he can use his eye, and he can use vision to control his finger more effectively. And then here's an older boy in a wheelchair. You'll notice, look at his legs. One ankle is up on the other knee. He's going around the room. He's playing a game with his mother. He's collecting cushions, putting them on his lap, and then when he has 4 cushions, he balances them on his head, one on top of the other. And he loves this sensation. He likes the pressure on his head, but he also likes the fact that he has to work his posture so the cushions don't fall off. And then when they do fall off, he laughs, and his mother complains that the cushions are all over the floor, and she puts them back on the couch, and as soon as she goes, he wheels over and he collects the cushions again, and it goes on. It's something you see very common. And then here is a child with a commercially available neckerchief. These are available for children who like to bite things. You often see children, if they're going to walk across the classroom, they pull their shirt up and they put it in their mouth and bite on it. And this biting behavior is another good way of telling your brain where your head is. If you clench your teeth, you get proprioceptive information coming through to your brain. And also now, I'm sure you've seen this, you can buy this silicone jewelry and children wear it. Mostly children get it to help them calm down. You know, the idea is if you bite on it, you calm down. But also, you calm down because when you bite on it, your brain has a much better idea where your body is. And excuse me if I fast forward because we only have 6 minutes left. Yeah, I'm going to go way forward. There's 2 more things I want to talk about. Bear with me. You'll see all sorts of nice pictures. I want to talk about dental problems and fatigue. The dental problems in charge are not very often addressed. Nobody will die because of teeth problems. So they often get left, and that's fine because you have to organize the heart and the breathing and the digestion and all those other things. But there are a whole range of issues associated with dental problems. Most of the dentists, if they are familiar with charge, they think it's all about orofacial clefting and doing surgery to repair this area, maybe to build a nose or to build an upper lip and to correct the teeth. But there are other issues as well. Where am I going? Yes, here. Facial palsy is quite common, and this can result in poor dental development. So anything which can treat the facial palsy will have a good impact on the way the teeth develop. The teeth may be misaligned. So instead of growing up next to each other, one tooth grows into another, and this is a major source of pain. And if you listen to Tim Hartshorne, he always talks about pain as a major cause of behavior problems in the children. If your child's behavior changes and gets very bad, it might be because of pain. And the pain could be a migraine in the head or in the stomach. It could be digestive problems, but it could be dental problems. The enamel on the teeth, the Zahnschmelz, the schmelz can be of poor quality. There is some research that for many people with charge, the dental enamel is not the best quality, so those teeth are more likely to decay and develop cavities. And I know so many parents who've really been very careful with their child's teeth. They brush the teeth right from an early age, but the child develops cavities. Then when they go to the dentist says to the parents, you really must look after the teeth. You know, you haven't been looking after the teeth. The dentist doesn't know about charge. The dentist doesn't know that the teeth might not be of really good quality. Reflux and vomiting brings stomach acid into the mouth, which is not good for teeth and gums. Some medications have a sugar base, which is really bad for teeth. Some children save food in the mouth. They pouch the food. I know Kim Blake talked about this. Sometimes it's involuntary because they don't feel the mouth very effectively, because the tongue might be a little bit big and it might not be controlled very well. We need the tongue to move the food around, and the food goes down here and it gets lost. But sometimes I think the children do it on purpose because they have a memory of choking. You know, they've had choking episodes again and again, and there's high anxiety about actually swallowing the food. And the last one is grinding the teeth. And I met somebody yesterday who was grinding his teeth, like in a really spectacular way. Grinding the teeth begins to answer that question, where is my head? Yeah, they clench the teeth, and then they discover if they grind the teeth, they get even more sensory information to the brain. Of course, it's a bad habit because it damages the teeth. But I think it begins as a functional behavior, and then it becomes an expression usually of anxiety in the children. This is a photo from a German book. This child had bad clefting. The surgeons have repaired the clefting, but now you see a big problem with the teeth. So now they've created a proper mouth, but the teeth are in the wrong place, and now the dentist will need to do more surgery. This is an adult I know in England. She's never had any dental work. She's 22 years old. And they've just been to see a dentist who took an X-ray, and you can see her teeth are a kind of disaster area. She's going to need a lot of dental work. Fortunately, these teeth have never been a problem. So the girl has never been in a position to let people know that things are this bad. And then I have permission from Heiko and Claudia to show these pictures. This was Jonas's upper teeth last year or the year before, 2 years ago maybe. Before, even before. And you can see the problem with the misalignment. And after surgery, things were greatly improved. So this is before, and this is after. And sadly, I'm told by Claudia that the teeth have started to move again and have started to migrate. So more surgery might be needed. Why do I talk about dental issues? First, there isn't very much in the literature. Secondly, the mouth is a gateway for infection. So all kinds of infections can come in through the mouth, especially if the teeth have decay. And we know that the children's immune system is usually not working well. So the more we can avoid any kind of infection, the better. And thirdly, good dental health helps with feeding and chewing, and also helps with speech production. So there are many reasons why the child's teeth should be examined, even though it's not as important as the heart and the breathing and those other things. And I'm going to finish, and this is just the time. Have you ever experienced... Oh, sorry.
Genau. Ich hatte früher, also vor ganz
In
langer
the past, so a long time ago, when I was very little,
meine Mama mich noch im Bauch hatte,
when I was still in my mom's belly and when I was born, I also had clefting.
innen drinne vieles
And there was a lot of things broken inside because it went deeper in my case.
hatte ich auch diesen Herzfehler.
Then I had the heart defect, so that needed surgery first. That was the first surgery. And then
Dann halt auch die OP kam an meinem Kiefer.
when I had then I had surgery for my clefting, and then they also realized that I had crooked teeth that also needed surgery because they were so crooked.
Jetzt ist es halt besser,
Now it's better,
auch ein bisschen schief.
but again it's become a little bit crooked, so the teeth have moved again.
And as I said, that's the sequence. You need the clefting has to be surgically repaired first. Then you can start to deal with the teeth and the misaligned teeth. Sometimes there are too many teeth in charge. Sometimes they are so misaligned that the teeth are here and there's one tooth like 6 centimeters back, right at the back of the mouth, you know, at the top of the mouth. So it can be a really serious issue. So thank you for that. And my last point is fatigue or Müdigkeit, often identified as laziness. I like the German word Faulheit. It's very German, Faulheit. Not you, though, not you. This is a list I made of 21 charge issues which can contribute to fatigue. If you are born with any one of these things, it can cause you to get more tired than other people. If you are born with 2 of these things, you will be even more likely to be more tired than other people. If you have 3 of these things, or 4 of these things, or 5 of these things, or 10 of these things, fatigue is going to be a regular part of your life. When you are a baby, when you are a school child, and when you are an adult. There's no way of escaping that. And we need to remember that. I showed this at one conference, and while I was talking, a parent in the room put her hand up, and she said, my son has 19 of those. There were only 2 things that her son didn't have. And if you think about that, think about people who tell you your child is lazy. Think about you when you say your child is lazy. They can be lazy, of course, because they're people, they're human beings. But really, we need to respect the amount of effort they put in to everything they do. And I'll finish with my last slide, which is a quote from one of my articles about education. I'm talking about school, and I say, what do I say? A good and effective educational program, while being very positive and having high expectations, should always take account of the fact that everything that a child with charge syndrome does is likely to take more thought, more attention, more concentration, more energy, and more time for them than it does for us. And when people say, why is this child so lazy? My question would be, why aren't children with charge syndrome more lazy? Because if that was me, I think I would just like to lie on the floor and not bother with things. These are some of the most driven, determined people you will ever meet. That is a great strength for them, and it can be a huge problem for you, as you all know. But that is one of the most fascinating things about the population that keeps me and other people interested. they do things and they want to do things, and they do things even if you try and stop them doing things. They find a way and they come up with a strategy which works for them. So that's the end. I've gone 6 minutes over and I had to cut things out. But I want to thank the people with charge in the audience who've contributed so much today. For me, it's been the best part of the presentation because it just helps me understand and it increases my confidence in what I'm saying.
Genau. Und deshalb ist es so, dass
And therefore, people who have charge, well, teachers often forget that and they often repeat that we're lazy, but that's not correct. We're not lazy. We simply have charge. It's a condition and it's hard for us. I really hate it. So, for example, doing gardening. I hate gardening. And then they say that we're lazy and they don't know that it's just charge. And then I get pressure from them. They tell me I have to do it, but I don't want to do it. I don't like doing it. And I just have charge, and that's why it is this way. I don't want to do something, but they don't understand that I'm simply exhausted. Because teachers don't know how it feels and they don't understand it. So they need to understand what charge means and that it doesn't mean that we're lazy. Yes, exactly.
genau, zum Beispiel
Exactly. Sometimes, say I'm working in the kitchen, the parents want that we're practicing things, learning things, improving, and I do help, but sometimes, for some people who have charge, it's okay to help and to manage, and for others, it's a little bit more difficult. Yes, exactly, that's right. We can also take turns, for example. Yes. So we, people with charge, are not lazy, and that's why it's good that you said it. We mustn't forget that. But sometimes our teachers do forget it, and they force us to do something. And then you need to do something for 3 hours straight, for example. Also, my brother, sometimes I have to help him too, and I can't do it because I don't manage to. It's not possible for me. And he doesn't have charge. My brother doesn't have charge, so he can do other things and do things for longer than I can.
I think we're going to have a busy night. So I hope that made sense, and I hope it's helpful. And what it gives you is a lot more to think about. And that one of the biggest problems always is for you finding balance. How can you tell if your child is being lazy or if it's charge syndrome? You always need to think about that very carefully. But I just agree with everything they said. I get so angry when the first thing people think is, this is a lazy girl or this is a lazy man. It's not acceptable. So thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank an David.
Well, thank you so much, David, for your interesting presentation. And I think now we all need dinner and a break. And at 7:30 p.m., we'll continue with our little sing-along concert with Großstadtengeln for those who are interested.